Welcome everyone to our live webinar on baby safety for the first year. I'm Olivia DeLong, Senior Health Editor at Baby Center, and I'm joined today by Dr. Hailey Nelson. She is a pediatrician, a lactation consultant, a spokesperson for the American Academy of Pediatrics, and a mother of three. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and so I know firsthand the craziness of the first year, all the worries and the planning. So I'm so excited for this conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. And just welcome, Dr. Nelson.
Thank you so much for having me. As a pediatrician and as a mom, I've experienced kind of both sides of it. So I understand the medical side and why we recommend what we do. And then I know from the mom side of why we worry sometimes, or what things should we actually be worried about and what things do we not need to worry about maybe as much. So I'm excited to share some tips and tricks today.
Great. Yeah, I feel like I worried about pretty much everything in that first year. We're going to always worry, but that first year as a first-time mom, it was tough with decision making and how to know what to do when. So, well, I'm going to get right into it. Today, we are going to just cover everything parents need to know about keeping baby safe in that first year. So throughout the webinar, we'll be linking to Baby Center content. So parents, you can find things that you're looking for. We have lots of great updated content on Baby Center, everything from CPR, feeding info. So look out for those in the chat or the Q&A function. And we've gathered a list of topic areas from our community and also from our social platforms. So starting kind of like, we're going to start at the beginning. Some of the ways that pregnant families can prepare their nursery for safe, let's get it all set up. I know that my daughter came premature, and so we didn't have much time to get it ready. Could you just talk through about some of those most important things for setting up the nursery?
Sure. It's that time where, we talk about nesting and getting ready for baby. And when you're designing that nursery, you're picking out the theme and your crib and all of those different features that go into that room and anxiously awaiting your baby, there are some tips that we want to share for making sure that we've got safety in mind. For example, with the crib, where you put it in the room actually matters. So with window shades, we worry about the cords. Now, a newborn's not going to be able to pull on those cords, but babies grow. And if they're able to reach those cords, that can be dangerous, or even installing the mobile over the crib, that you want to make sure that it's installed properly, again, so your baby doesn't pull it down on themselves. And so really thinking through some of those things, as well as future things. So as much as you can pre-plan, because as your baby's growing, you're going to be busy. And so something like your dresser and actually doing the furniture mounts to the wall, if you do that while you're pregnant and you're expecting, you don't have to worry about that when your toddler starts pulling out those drawers that they might be able to tip the dresser over. So some pre-planning can go a long way for getting ready for a baby to actually arrive.
That's great. I'm mentally going in my head about my daughter's room now. We for some reason cannot get rid of that mobile. She's 3, but I still have that hanging over her little glider. So just making sure those things. I love the tip about making sure the dresser is secured to the wall, because when they start walking, it's kind of all over with.
It is. And then there's things like your changing table, right? And so they come with straps, and a newborn doesn't roll, so you don't really think too much about those straps, but why they're there. And it's because your baby doesn't roll today, but they might tomorrow. And there's so many times where parents put their baby and then you need to grab wipes. You're distracted for some reason and you turn, and that's the day your baby decides to learn to roll over. And so again, planning ahead, knowing where they might go with their development so that you're one step ahead of your baby, so that you can hopefully prevent some of those injuries.
Love those tips. Thank you. So I'm going to kind of switch gears for our next question. I think a lot of parents, they get the car seat in, they're planning what car seat they're going to get. They put it on their registry. There's just so many options. It's really hard to know how to install the car seat and what to look for. Can you kind of walk us through, things to look for when buying a car seat, and then what we should do, first thing as we're installing that car seat?
Yeah. One of the main things is you want a car seat that is regulated. And so some of the car seats that are purchased from foreign websites may not meet the same safety profile in the United States. So we really want to make sure that it is crash tested and it's regulated here. When you're installing your car seat, whatever came in the box with your seat, those are the items that you're allowed to use with your seat. So if you go to the store, you're going to see those cute little strap covers or the little pillow to support their head. Anything aftermarket, anything that you buy in the store that didn't come in the box with your car seat is not crash tested. Therefore, it's not actually safe. And so we really want to use however the seat came in its box and not make any changes to it, because in the event of a crash, you really want that seat to perform at its top level. And so that means not altering it in any way.
Okay. Very important. Is there a resource that parents can go to make sure the car seat they're buying is certified and safe?
Yeah, so there are websites that you can check in terms of the safety. There also are resources that you can look at for getting someone to help you install your seat. So at our children's hospital, I actually have car seat technicians. Like, that is their job, to know how to install it, which seats are recalled, and they will go through that for you. So if you have any doubt, you can reach out and look in your community to see who's a certified car seat technician. Lots of people might want to give you advice about car seats, but if they have not done that extensive training, they may not know the things in particular for your seat. So you really want a technician to be the one to help you if there are any questions, because it's not easy to put those in your car, and based on the make and model of your car and getting that angle right and all of those things. So I phone a friend, honestly, when it comes to getting my seats properly installed.
Yeah, I was going to say each car seat has its own straps, and, you know, depending on the car, I know my husband's car is different than my car. And when we move it from one place to another, it's just good to know how to do it and know how to do it properly.
Yeah, and that it doesn't wiggle in the car, and then the whole keeping them rear facing till at least stage 2. So there's a lot of logistics to that. The other thing that's coming up is we're heading into fall and winter. And so a car seat safety thing that's really important is that your baby is not wearing a coat or snowsuit or anything like that underneath the straps. And so you want to make sure that you put your baby in and you tighten those straps so that you pass the pinch test. And what that means is that you're actually going to grab the strap of the car seat right at the shoulder and see if you can pinch it. If you can pinch it, that strap is not tight enough yet. And so we really want it nice and snug. And when they have their coat on, we can't get the straps as snug. And again, it's not going to perform as well. So getting your baby into their seat, making those straps nice and tight. And then if you are somewhere where it's cold, then you can put a blanket kind of over their lap to help keep them warm.
I was going to say, can we put blankets on top, or is that a no-no as well?
So the blankets on top, that one's a little bit debatable. And what happens there is if you leave a blanket over the top, you're going to build up that stale air that's inside there. So there is that risk of it, becoming warm and the airflow isn't as good. Now, quickly doing that so that you can get out to the car if it's raining or snowing or something, sure, like that makes sense. But it's not recommended to leave a blanket over the top of the car seat for an extended period of time
while driving. Okay,
yeah.
Great to know. So moving on, so this is actually something that I did not know until really I started at Baby Center, kind of having that first aid kit at home. Of course, we know we need all these things. We're told we need all of these things for that first year, that first week, but having an actual first aid kit that's loaded with all the essentials. Can you walk us through what those essential items are to have on hand at home, what it would be nice to have, but not totally necessary, and then the non-negotiable items to keep in the first aid kit at home?
Yeah, I agree. There's so many lists when you're pregnant and you look at the list of what am I supposed to have in the nursery and what should be in this first aid kit and all of the things. And when it comes to a first aid kit, and I'm talking about an infant, there are only a few things that you actually need. Now, as your child grows, then there's more stuff that kind of comes into play. But when I'm looking at newborns, bulb suction, that one for sure. You want to make sure that you have a sucker bulb, a nose frida, you have some way to get the boogers out if your baby is congested. That's going to be certainly on the top of the list for me, as well as a thermometer. So knowing if your child has a fever and being able to take an accurate temperature at home, those are my two that really come into play. when you look at the rest of kind of those first aid kits, sometimes they have grooming things in them like fingernail clippers, which is great. And then we look at the Band-Aids and how we handle boo-boos and things like that. And that's really for, as your baby gets bigger. So infants don't really need Band-Aids just yet. Wait until they're crawling, walking, and getting into more trouble, and then by all means you'll need those. But the nose suction and being able to help them when they're congested, that's going to be certainly a game changer if your baby does get sick.
And that I would recommend taking them from, the hospital gives you plenty of those when you go home. I know we were loaded up with like 5 or 6. And just a note on the Band-Aids, my daughter is 3, like I mentioned, and now she wants a Band-Aid for everything, even if there's not a boo-boo involved. So Band-Aids are definitely a necessity for us right now.
Things, mom, like the parent kisses, Band-Aids, and then also the little ice packs. So my daughter, she loved, we have this little penguin one, and so she would get hurt and then she'd ask for a pinguino, and so you'd go and you get her the penguin ice pack and magically it was better. But one of my other children, they were all about their Band-Aids and it had to be the certain character, and then you go through the whole box in like half a day. And so it's funny that what they pick is as their thing of comfort. So knowing as a parent, you're going to go through a lot of Band-Aids, even if they don't actually have owies.
Yeah. And, I pick my battles, and that's just not one. If she wants a Band-Aid on her finger, that is totally fine. So
if they feel better, and then we move on, right?
And we move on and we get to
battles.
school. Yeah. Great. So another thing, I can personally relate to this. I think a lot of the questions we get about fevers, especially this time of year, kids, babies, especially in that first year where we're just not sure. Fevers. Can you talk about, what to watch out for, when it's necessary to get immediate attention, medical attention, and then kind of the temperatures to help gauge that?
Sure. Yes. Fever, phobia is real. Parents do worry a lot because you get worried when your child is sick. And so a fever really is a sign that their body is fighting something. And the threshold kind of is in that first 2 months of life. So before baby's able to get their vaccines, before they're kind of building up their own immune system, they're more vulnerable if they do get sick. So it is a medical emergency if your baby has a fever under the age of 2 months. You're going to call the pediatrician, and if I answer the phone, I'm going to tell you, don't pass go, please head to the emergency room. And so that's the message that we give families. And when you go home from the hospital after you have your baby, they remind you if your baby has a fever, you need to come in and be evaluated. Now, once you've had that 2-month appointment and you get baby's first set of shots, we get to relax a little bit. So I feel like I can breathe as a pediatrician once baby's starting to build their own immune system. So yes, I worry if your child has a fever, but it's a little bit different than the newborn. So that 2-month window. And so then knowing when you can treat your fever at home and when to come in are kind of the next parts of what to do with your fever.
Okay. And the community is asking, what type of thermometer do you recommend, especially for newborns?
Yeah. So, I mean, you can look, there's the rectal thermometers, there's the forehead ones. I've seen the pacifier ones. There's ones that then you can adapt it like under the tongue versus the armpit. Honestly, whatever you feel like is going to give you reliable results, I'm okay with. They used to recommend only the rectal thermometer, and a lot of people don't really want to do that to their baby. And so I feel like it's okay. If you've got a reliable thermometer, so if it is one of the forehead ones and it's reading high, and then you check yourself, I totally do this, right? So I check my child and then I check myself. I'm like, okay, you really do have a fever because mine's reading normal. So if you do that kind of double checking, you're like, okay, baby's sick, then you call your friendly pediatrician and we help you figure out, again, if it's a newborn, you're going to the emergency room. If you have a slightly older baby or child, then we're talking about how do we manage our fevers at home. And so that's knowing, our Tylenol dosing, when you can give that versus Ibuprofen, and what other things you can do to help comfort your child so that you can take care of them.
Okay. I still feel like my natural inclination is to call my daughter's pediatrician whenever there's a fever, even if it's just a slight fever. So that was really good to know.
Yeah, it's okay. That's what we're here for. So I'll put it out there. That's why I have my job, is that I want to be here and I want to support parents taking care of their children. And so if your child is sick and you're worried, call me, and then I'll either help talk you off the ledge or tell you, oh, it sounds serious, let's send you in to see my friends in the emergency room. Like that's what we're here for. Don't feel bad calling your doctor. It's okay.
I don't. She's like, you can handle this. Just the other day, my daughter had a cough and my pediatrician's like, you got this, the inhaler,
Yes.
So, but it's just that comfort feeling of calling if we need something, for sure.
Yeah. And I know I mentioned the medications, Tylenol versus ibuprofen. So acetaminophen, is Tylenol, and that you can give starting at age 2 months. We have to hold off on the ibuprofen or the Motrin until 6 months, and it has to do with the baby's kidney development. And the other caveat to both of those medications is that you really want to read the label, because there's infant dosing versus big kid dosing, and it's weight-based and age-based. So again, if you're looking at it and you're confused and don't know how much to give, call your doctor, because we've probably recently seen you and your child, and we know how much your child weighs, so we can give you the advice on then how much to give.
I was going to say, often it doesn't say for infants because they want you to check in with your pediatrician. Right. So it's good to know that we can just call and you've got their weight. And okay. And then we've got a question coming in the chat. How many degrees is considered a fever?
So a fever is considered 100.4 or higher. So that is the threshold. Sometimes people talk about having a low grade fever when they're really like 99. 100.4 is my cutoff for what we call a fever within like medical practice. Because again, from a mom standpoint, I'm like, oh, they feel a little warm. But if you hit that, that's the number at which I say, okay, you really do have a fever. Now, I don't have like a scary number. And often parents, they call and they say, oh, but it's 103. Is that bad? Like, again, if we think about it, a fever is a sign that your baby is fighting something. So their immune system is working hard to get rid of those icky germs, and they're doing their job. The reason why babies feel crummy is that when you have a fever, like you just feel achy and you don't feel good. So it's not that we're necessarily trying to treat them for the fever, but sometimes if we give them medicine and bring that temperature down, they feel a little bit better. They feel a little less achy and, fussy. And then maybe they're willing to eat a little bit better for you. Maybe they'll actually take a nap. All of those things that we hope for them.
Sleep is always the best medicine for fevers or really anything.
Or anything. And moms don't get enough of it, right? I mean, we've got to talk about sleep
too, not just our kids. So this one it's coming up a lot, I think, now too, with RSV and flu going around. I know here in Atlanta, those two things are just spreading like wildfire. My daughter had RSV not too long ago. Can we talk a little bit about emergencies with little ones? So, knowing when to call the pediatrician versus going to the ER versus calling 911. Can you kind of break those three categories down for us?
Yeah, so that's a great question for what do I do when we think about what a true emergency is. So if your child is having difficulty breathing, what I want you to do is actually go ahead and take the onesie off. So you really want to look at them and how their breathing is. And so a child who's having respiratory distress and difficulty breathing, they're going to be retracting. What that means is in between each of those ribs, you can actually see the skin like sucking in. You can also sometimes see their little belly going in and out really fast. So if you look at them and you're like, that's not how you normally look, that's a sign that they're kind of struggling. So children who are having difficulty breathing, that is then something where, depending on how bad it is, are we calling 911 versus are you able to safely bring them in? So respiratory distress, and certainly you talked about RSV, like that one, it causes a lot of snot and mucus. And so they have a hard time with that. And the littler ones do worse because they get all plugged up and then they just stop breathing on us, which I don't like. And so again, looking at how your baby's breathing to make that decision. If you're concerned and you don't know, like you can't quite tell, is this do we need to go to the ER or can I be seen in the pediatrician's office? That's why we have nurse triage. So I would say calling your pediatrician's office if you are a little unclear which way to go. But respiratory issues where it's difficulty breathing, that's more than 911 versus going into the ER.
Are there any other things besides breathing issues where it's like we need to go call 911, or I guess it's different going to the urgent care or emergency room. Are there any other things to watch out for there?
I think, when we talk about fevers, sometimes babies who are really fussy and irritable and like they just stop crying. So it's one thing if I hear about a baby who's fussy, but then, if you hold them just right, if you get them the pacifier, whatever you can do, you can kind of calm them down. But a baby who has like that high pitched scream and just doesn't stop, that tells me maybe there's something else going on. One of the things as doctors, we feel the top of their head. So that soft spot, if it's bulging out, I'm like, that's not good. So those would be times where if they're really irritable and screaming and the soft spot's bulging, I'm like, that's an emergency room thing. Okay. The opposite too. So a baby who won't wake up for you. So it's one thing if your child like sleeps through a feed and you're like, oh, they don't feel good. But like if your baby's not waking up or is acting like a limp little rag doll, there's something wrong and you want to make sure you bring them in to be evaluated.
Okay. It's so hard to know, especially if you're a first time parent. It's just, everything seems like a big deal, and it might be. So that was a really helpful breakdown for us.
Yeah. It's hard even as a doctor mom. Can I say, I phoned a friend. I called one of my ER friends this morning because my child had a swollen foot. I was like, I think we need antibiotics. But I wanted to have an outside opinion. So it's not easy the first time around. It's not easy the third time around because each child's different. So it's okay to kind of question yourself. That's normal as a parent. And then to know where your resources are to help, guide you through.
Yeah. And I feel like I try to listen to that in, that first thought that comes to my mind, like there's something wrong. I should listen to that and act on that. So, okay. So this is a really popular topic. This next question is about sleep. Safe sleep is our most popular content search topic on our site and among our social audience and our community audience. We're going to have actually a webinar next year on safe sleep because there's just so much to talk about. But can you just give us kind of a rundown on creating a very safe sleep environment? There's lots of rumors and things circulating out there right now. Can you just break down safe sleep for our listeners here?
Yeah. Well, safe sleep is so important. And I love talking about it because it means that, again, your child is sleeping safely, but that you as a parent can get some rest too. And as a mom, I don't get enough sleep. So if I can help other mommies get sleep and other dads get sleep, I'm winning here. Now, in order to do that, we've got different mnemonics. And so I really like the ABCs. So you want your baby sleeping alone. That doesn't mean that they have to be, isolated in their room down the hall away from you, but we want them to have a separate sleep space. Okay. We want to lay them down on their back. So that's the B of ABCs, is laying them down on their back every time. Now, as your child grows, they're going to figure out how to roll over, and that's fine. You just keep laying them down on their back. So if you do have a roller and they have rolled over, if they can roll over, I assume that then they can get back. And so we're fine. But for those newborns, we really want them on their back because it has to do with the position of their airway. And so that's, a couple of the different tips that I talk about. And then in terms of the crib setup itself, you really just need a flat fitted sheet, and that's it. I don't want anything extra in there. And when you look at the baby store, sometimes you see the quilts and the bumpers and all these cute things and the stuffed animals. None of that actually belongs in your baby's bed. We really just want to give them space because for newborns, they don't have that head and neck control. So they can't actually pick up their head and they can get smushed in. And that's where your baby has a risk of being suffocated. So if we just give them that nice open environment, and then as they grow, they have room to roll around. And I don't know about your toddler, but they seem to do gymnastics overnight. So as babies grow, they do all sorts of funny things. Right?
We're still in the crib because I'm just holding on to that so that, I don't have to worry about her walking around the house all night. So we're still in the crib and she seems fine, but I know it's coming.
Hey, as long as they're not jumping out. So the friend that I called who's an ER doctor, her child actually jumped out of the crib while she was working one of the shifts, and her husband had to bring the child in with a broken arm. And so it was a whole thing. So if your child gets to the point where they can jump out of the crib, then you have to transition. But until then, you don't have to. That's why cribs have the mattress height that you can raise and lower. And so when you've got a newborn, you can have it up at that higher setting because you don't have to hurt your back and you can lay them down. Once they can sit up, we've got to start lowering that mattress so that they can't climb out. So really being mindful of the height of the mattress so that your baby is safe and in there, especially when they start to do those gymnastics things.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the day. She seems fine now, but I know by 3, it's going to be time for the toddler bed. So,
yep. And you never know, each kid's different. I have 3 kids and they have all done it differently. So you don't know until you get to that point with yours.
Can you talk a little bit about breastfeeding in bed and things to watch out for there, as newborns, breastfeeding, bottle feeding, just talk a little bit about feeding as it relates to safe sleep.
Yeah. So breastfeeding in bed is something that totally can happen, that sideline position. So when you're laying down on your side and you've got baby right there, this is a time where, you're kind of at risk of dozing off, which makes sense because you've been waking up every 2 to 3 hours for however many, days, weeks, months, it all just like blurs together. And so you're very tired. And so you might then doze off, even if you don't think that you will. So I recommend for this one, either setting a timer because you know how long your baby usually feeds, or this is where, like, if you have a partner, you throw an elbow and you get them to then come get baby, change the diaper, put them back to bed, and you get to roll over and go back to sleep. And so both, being mindful of the fact that you are tired and how can you help yourself, and then working as a team. So if you do have a teammate, like, hey, they can change diapers, they can do other things if you're the one who's breastfeeding, so that you can kind of even out that workload and be able to take care of yourself.
Awesome. Good to know. So this is, as our child is older and grows through that first year, they're going to start being introduced to real foods, solid foods. Choking is such a big part of that first year and being prepared for that. I mean, it's a part of any year when you have a child, being prepared and ready for an emergency. How can we prevent choking in infants and children as they grow through that first year? How can we prepare? What should we be doing?
So the one thing for preparing is really take the classes. Know how to respond to someone choking. And it's not just having the parent or caregiver take the classes, but as many people around you who have taken it. Because sometimes if your child's the one who's choking and you panic, the calm aunt who happens to be there might be the one to swoop in and help you. But if you're alone with your child and they're choking, we really want you to know what to do and how to respond. And so I have some demo babies with me. So I have, from my clinic, I do complex primary care. So this baby has a little G tube. So this is one of my babies there. All right. And then I also brought another one. This one has the trach. And so for both of these babies, if I was feeding the child, and so this one's a little on the small side, but it'll work for the demonstration of your baby's in the high chair, you're feeding them, and all of a sudden you hear them start kind of coughing and sputtering. Now, if your baby is coughing and kind of sputtering, like you can tell that they're choking, if they're still able to make coughing sounds, that means their airway's not completely blocked, but we want to help them clear it. And so what you would do is you would unbuckle them from their from the high chair, you get them out, and the first thing that you're going to do is you're actually going to use you're going to flip them over. It's your non-dominant hand. So I'm a righty, so I want to use my left hand to hold baby's head and neck and to turn them down. And so again, I'm holding up so you can see, and you're going to do 5 taps on the back, right between the shoulder blades. Okay. And this is hopefully going to help them. Again, we've got them pointed down. You would normally do this on your lap, but when you do this, hopefully it helps kind of whatever stuff there kind of come flying out. If it doesn't, you flip the baby over and you have them laying on your lap. And then you're going to do 5 compressions. So you're going to go right in the middle of their chest and you're going to push down and count to 5. And if your baby's still coughing and sputtering, we just keep repeating that to try to help them clear whatever got stuck. Now, if at any point baby goes completely limp, so all of a sudden you're doing this, your baby was coughing, and now they're just a limp little ragdoll, that's when you switch into CPR mode. And I will say, before starting any of this, the call for help. So
I was just going to say, what should we be doing before?
Yeah. So you don't want to wait until your baby goes limp. Hopefully you just get them out, you give them a couple pats and they cough it up and we're good. But if you're not, you already want to make sure that help is on the way. And so that is getting that call to 911. So if you are alone, you're calling 911, putting them on speakerphone and helping your child. If there's someone else, like have them grab the phone so that you can tend to your child. But we really want to help them clear that airway. One of the things people used to do was to do like the finger sweep. And so they'd say, oh, there's something in there, let me get it out. We don't recommend that, because if you don't see what's in there and you're trying to just say, oh, I'm going to get it out, you might actually push whatever they're choking on back down their throat and get it stuck. So no blind finger sweeps. You're not going to put your fingers in their mouth. If you see it like in their mouth and it's on the way out, you can help them clear it. But we really don't want to stick anything in there. You're just going to go with the back pats and then switching over to the front and the chest compressions to try to help give a little oomph to that cough that your baby's doing to hopefully clear their airway.
Okay. I love the visual. That really helps. I know when my daughter was actually in the NICU and we actually couldn't bring her home until we took a CPR course at the hospital and got that little certificate and checked that off. So it's really like, it was really helpful to have that baby to practice on for sure. I probably need to do it again because it's been a while.
Yeah. Well, and I'm going to hold the baby up again. It feels weird when you're pushing on a baby and like pushing on their chest, and to get that practice to understand like how hard you have to push. So these dolls are made differently. So this one you can actually, so you can hear like the air when I'm pushing. And so you get a sense of like how much pressure it would be, because again, as a parent, you're like, I don't want to hurt my child, but yet at the same time, I want to be effective because I need to help them start breathing so that we're not going into full CPR and that we don't have a situation. So feeling comfortable. Also just like how you move your hands. So the using your hands to like hold their head and neck when you're tipping them over, like that's kind of a weird move. So practicing that like with your child as you're sitting around of like, how do I hold you and get you turned over so that you're not feeling as fumbly, because again, it's an odd position that you're trying to get yourself in, but that's the most effective is when we can get baby down like this across your lap and then get that hand right there, and you can hear the air coming out of this one for when you're doing a good job, that if that air is coming through, hopefully it'll dislodge whatever got stuck.
Okay. Yeah. And I think practicing too is because in the moment when it's happening, you're panicked and you freak out. And so if you've practiced, I think it's more natural to kind of step in and take action for sure.
Yeah. And doctors, we practice. I have to recertify. So every 2 years I go and it's a whole day long class, not only with the infant basics, but all of the like hospital side of things for what we do and how we respond in emergencies. So that this is something where taking that refresher course, if it's been a little while, and feeling comfortable with how to do it, so it becomes second nature. So that's not something that you're like, oh, what's the number? How many do I do? Like that you kind of, hopefully it kicks in and you're able to just respond.
Okay, great. And then when we're talking about, introducing foods, I know that can be pretty scary for parents as they're, at the 6-month mark or whenever is recommended by your child's pediatrician. Can you talk through about some of the safe foods, some of the foods that you always want to avoid in that first year? Just kind of talk us through when we're first starting with those solid foods.
All right. This is such a good question because parents ask this a lot and it's exciting, right? When you finally get to go either from breast and bottle feeding to, we're going to introduce foods. And then there's the question of like, well, what do I introduce and how do I do it safely? And there's different schools of thought for that baby-led weaning versus starting with your purees, how you go about that. The good news for parents is that we really have changed our guidance over the last few years of what we tell families that you have to completely avoid. So yes, of course, you're going to start with something that's easy for them. And so that's really where purees come in. But in terms of foods that you have to avoid, the only thing on the list, quite honestly, in the first year of life is honey. So no honey in the first year of life because there's a risk of botulism. outside of that, I want your baby to try and experience everything. And so we want families to actually introduce peanut butter. We want you to introduce eggs, and that there are good studies to show that if you avoid foods that are considered allergic, you increase your risk of becoming allergic to them. So that early introduction actually is protective for your baby. So gradually introducing them to a variety of things, and that knowing when you first start off that foods, it's just fun. They're still getting their calories from their breast milk or from their formula, but experiencing that with your child. The other tip that I tell families is that it can take more than 10 introductions of any food before your baby decides that they like it. So this is a time, have your camera ready. Like, they make all sorts of cute faces and you make a mess. But if your baby acts like you're poisoning them and you're trying to feed them green beans, like, hang on, just keep trying. And eventually they'll be like, why didn't you feed this to me before? I love it. And you're like, I've tried the last, several nights. But eventually, like, it clicks and they will like it. So to kind of stay persistent with offering them a variety of foods. And if they act like they don't like it, it's okay. We can teach them to try different things, and eventually they'll kind of come around and be good eaters for you.
I remember those days very well. There were some things that I really wanted her to like that she didn't, but now she's totally fine with them. So we just keep powering through. One thing I wanted to mention when we're talking about CPR, we have baby center courses that addresses just that. So at online courses, we're going to include some links at the end of the webinar for parents who want to have an online class just kind of ready and waiting for them, either during pregnancy or even in that first few weeks when they just need a refresher. We've got lots of baby center courses for parents to check out. So we'll be sure to include the links there. I just love online courses as well, because they're just, you can pop one open whenever you have a chance, especially during pregnancy. So I just wanted to mention that.
I love it. Or I gotta say, breastfeeding and being up in the middle of the night, sometimes, to stay awake, I would sit in the rocking chair and then I'd be scrolling on my phone. And
Good idea. Yeah.
If you're up and you have a newborn, and instead of spending that time checking out, your social media, like, you can watch one of those refresher courses. So checking that off the list when you're already up in the middle of the night.
Great. Is there anything else you want to touch on? We've got some time. I have a few other questions that came in on our social, on our Instagram, that we can address. Is there anything else you think we might have missed with sleep, CPR, feeding, car seat, anything we've talked about that you kind of want to go back to or mention when it comes to safety?
So I think the sleep one, I know you're doing a webinar on it, is a biggie just because of how much time babies spend sleeping. So newborns can spend up to 18 hours a day sleeping. It's just not all at once. And so really having a game plan in place for how you are going to approach safe sleep for your child. So we talked about that crib or bassinet, but to watch out for the swings and if they fall asleep in a different place. So car seats, if they fall asleep in the car seat and you bring them into your home, as hard as it is to just, you want to leave them there because you don't want to wake a sleeping baby, but that it's not the right incline. And so something that happens with newborns is that they don't have that good head and neck control, so think about a baby, they're kind of floppy. And because of that, when they're in a swing or when they're in their car seat and it's not at the right angle the way it's installed in your car, they can kind of tip their head forward and pinch off their airway. And so if your baby falls asleep in one of those places, you do want to move them to be flat on their back, again, in the crib, the bassinet, somewhere that is a safe sleep space for them.
The transfer, that was always, some babies.
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
I know. It's such a tough one. And I know, like, again, as a mom, like, I kind of cringed. I was like, oh, please stay asleep. And you kind of do the sway thing. And then you like slowly lower them and like tiptoe away as if that's going to make it magically like work. And sometimes it does. Sometimes they wake up. But I would rather have your baby wake up than to be in a situation that's not safe for them and they're breathing while they're sleeping.
Okay. One question that's coming in is, can newborns sleep in their crib or do they need to start out on a bassinet?
Either one. It's totally fine. It really has to do with convenience. So if you think about the fact that you're going to be waking up every 2 to 3 hours, if next to your bed, you're able to kind of get that bassinet so the baby is right there, you can tend to them and then hopefully fall back asleep, but you're in your own spots. That's great. Some people have larger rooms and they're able to put the crib in there. So I think about saving as much, like saving those few seconds so that then maybe I would get some sleep. And that's really why, you know, if baby's room is down the hall and then I've got to like walk down the hall and walk all the way back, like then I'm all the way awake. And so I'd rather just, okay, you know, you pick up baby, you nurse, or you get the bottle and then you change that diaper, you get them back to sleep on their back in their sleep space. And then hopefully you are crawling under those covers and closing your eyes and getting a few, you know, moments of rest for yourself.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's going to be different for every family, right? As long as it's safe, you know, I think families can decide what works best for them, like you said, logistically and just in their own home. So great tips. So I'm just going to ask you a couple questions we got from Instagram since we have some time, kind of going back to, well, actually, let's just go to the sleeping question since we're on the topic. One of the questions was, my 4-month-old can roll from their back to their belly while they're sleeping. Is it safe for them to sleep on their belly? So we kind of already addressed this, but definitely want to go back and
Yeah, so congratulations that your baby's rolling. That's exciting. And you certainly, during the day when they're awake, you want to make sure you're doing your tummy time with them, because that's where they're going to build those muscles up and become like little pre-crawlers. So giving them that activity time during the day. When you put your 4-month-old that can roll to sleep, we want to make sure there's a couple of things that if you're still swaddling, that their arms are out. So sometimes with those wearable blankets and like the sleep sacks that you kind of can Velcro arms in. So babies who can roll need to have their arms out, and then put them on their back and let them do the rest on their own. So, you know, I remember my son, I would go in and I'm like, I put you in the middle of the crib, and I'd come and I'd find him with his like bottom up and he'd be over in the corner. I'm like, how did you get there? But they do all sorts of things. As long as you've got the crib set up safely so that it's just the fitted sheet and nothing in there, let them roll around. They're going to be just fine. Okay, great. Awesome. And kind of switching gears a little bit, let's see what that other question was. Should I be worried about heavy metals in baby foods? What baby foods are safe? I know this is going to be different for everyone. So is there a general rule about choosing baby foods? I would say to make sure that it's not recalled. So we unfortunately have been in a situation in our country where there was a formula recall, and there's just, I feel like there's been all sorts of things and it's hard to keep up. So when you're looking for foods, just like when you're looking for cribs, all of the baby stuff, that as long as we don't have something that's recalled and it's being sold, it should be safe for your child. So to check in to see for that. And then you don't actually have to buy baby food. So that's another thing too, is if you're one of those ambitious moms and or dads, and you want to make it yourself, like that's fine too. Some of the easy foods that you can start off with would be bananas or avocados, just because they're already pre-mushy for you. So it takes some of the work out, but don't feel like you necessarily have to go and buy a certain brand or have to, do that to feed your child. If that's more convenient, that's also okay too. So go with whatever is going to work best for your family. We did a combo and it worked great. So yeah, definitely what works best for your family. So we've got lots of questions coming in. So this is actually something I'm curious about. Going back to car seat safety, should you put the car seat preferably behind a front seat or in the middle seat? Like, where should the car seat be positioned in the car? Yeah. Oh, this is a good strategy game. So technically, if you only have one car seat and you have the type of, you can install it in the middle of the car, that's going to be your safest seat. Because if you got hit on either side of the car, then the seat's not going to get touched, right? Now there's the reality of when you're putting that seat, babies grow, they get heavier. So lugging that car seat and getting it to clip into the base in the middle can be challenging. So if that doesn't work, again, with the make and model of your car, either side is fine. We just want to make sure that when the seat is installed, that there's no wiggle, that you really have it using the latch system, if that's what your car seat uses. So kind of the way that it clicks in, and that you've got a good fit for that seat, so that it's at the right angle and all of those technical things, which again is why I tend to phone a friend and use my car seat text to make sure, not only for my children, but then for my patients, because so many parents have questions about this, and it's easy for an expert to look and be like, oh, no, and then they make those changes.
Great. And we have another question about car seats. Yeah. What is the longest a baby should be in a car seat?
So if you have, this is a good one, because if you have a premature baby, so babies who are born early and have to stay in the intensive care unit. So if you have a NICU stay, they actually have to do a car seat test before they go home. And that is something where if your baby fails the test, which it's okay, it's like baby's first test and we're talking about failing. But what that means is that we leave them hooked up to the monitors, we strap them in their seat, and then we watch and see what they do. And if they have a hard time maintaining their airway, breathing while they're in their seat, then we give them a break and then we try again. So some premature babies don't actually tolerate being in their car seats. For a healthy term baby, or once your child is home with you, I don't really have a number cutoff for how long you can stay in a car seat. Now, if you're wanting to go on a road trip, we have the holidays coming up, you want to go visit people. If it is a long drive, like your child may not tolerate that because, again, babies eat every 2 to 3 hours. You need to change diapers. So you're often needing to stop to get them out, to be able to feed them, change the clothes when that diaper blowout happens, kind of all of those details that kind of factor into traveling with a child. But I don't have a number cut off for like how long they theoretically could be in their seat. Great. They're going to let you know.
My daughter was in the NICU, so we had to do that test, and we just sat there and made sure she was okay. She was so tiny, so we worried, but it was no big deal. Good to know. So there's lots of questions. I'm really liking to see these questions coming in. There's lots of questions about honey. So can we go back to talking about honey in the first year? Is honey safe? Honey, like, contain honey versus raw honey, foods that contain honey that we may not know that are not safe for baby in the first year. So even more than you said earlier about honey, I think our audience
honey. We have honey questions. Okay.
Yeah.
So it has to do more with like the raw honey. I wouldn't worry if honey is somehow an ingredient in a food that is cooked and processed. If it's cooked, it probably, again, the likelihood of your child getting botulism from a honey-containing product that was somehow contaminated is very low. But we just don't want to give honey as a food itself to an infant. So in that first year, after 1 year of age, then they can have it. So just that's something to look out for. But I feel like for the most part, again, if you're worried about it being an ingredient, that's not something where it's going to be hidden in there and somehow your baby's going to get sick. So to not worry there.
So just plain honey, raw. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Great to know. Okay. Really switching gears here. Okay. One question is, can you explain the process of storing breast milk? Can you store it in the fridge or freezer? And for how long is it safe to give that milk to the baby?
Yes, good question. Okay, so breast milk storage, there actually is a table. I wrote the article for the American Academy of Pediatrics on this. So it's on healthychildren.org, and we can share that link out too, that goes through how long you can leave breast milk out at room temperature before you even need to put it into the fridge, how long it's good in the refrigerator before you put it into the deep freezer. There's even logistics too for if you're freezing breast milk, then we don't recommend that you put it in the door of your freezer. So if you do have like that freezer door that opens, you want to put the milk actually deep in the freezer because the door temperature is different than the back of your freezer. And then how long it can stay in the freezer. So there's some really great tables and guides to kind of how to go about the storage of breast milk, and then also the thawing and when you can use it. But really wanting to support parents. And so if you are breastfeeding and you've got extra milk, so if you're pumping to be able to return to work, or if you just want to be able to possibly be away from baby and have someone else feed, that it's a great thing to be able to store it. We just want to make sure that it's stored safely so that it doesn't get contaminated, that it then stays with the same nutrient profile to be able to then feed it to your baby when they need it.
Okay, great. Yeah, and we have some content on our site too that we probably used the American Academy of Pediatrics to find out what to write about. So we'll definitely share links to that content. Let's see. I'm going to see if there's any other, let's stay with the feeding topic for just a second. So this is a really great question. When and how is it safe to introduce water to a baby who is 6 months?
All right. So 6 months, you already gave me the answer, which is perfect. We wait on introducing water until 6 months because of kidney development. And so your first 6 months of life, the way you get water is through the breast milk or the formula. You don't give anything extra to your baby to drink. Once they're able to take solids, we expect that then their body can handle it. And so you can then do sips of water. And whether it's room temperature, cold, like that part doesn't actually matter. And you just want to kind of give them some sips, and you can start with, again, in a bottle. And then as your child is getting bigger, introducing a sippy cup, because we also want to be able to wean babies off of bottles for their teeth development and for their mouth by the time they have that first birthday. So that's something else, is as you're feeding your baby, and yes, they're drinking from a bottle, but at some point we want to show them what a sippy cup is like, and being able to help them off of that. But water it's good to be introduced anytime after 6 months.
Okay, great to know. And then on the subject of bottles, someone asked, what is better, glass or plastic? Do glass bottles potentially leak plastics into milk and formula? And can you warm them in the microwave? So kind of just like an FYI, plastic versus glass.
Well, so there's plastic, glass, or then there's even like the stainless steel ones, kind of like the stainless steel water bottles. They all have their pros and cons. So I know that people worry about plastic and whether or not it then leaks the BPA. And so if you're buying a plastic bottle, making sure that it's one that specifically says that it's BPA free, or that it has information on it for the bottle. When it comes to the glass ones, sometimes then there's those silicone sleeves that go over them just to be able to make it easier to hold and not slippery, and then you don't break it. And then there's the stainless steel ones. Now, for any of the bottles, we don't want to warm what we're giving baby in a microwave. Okay. And so that is one of the things that I will say, is that we're not using a microwave. And the reason is that microwaves actually can have hot spots. So if you think about, if I was microwaving a slice of cheese pizza, I'm like, oh, I'm hungry, I'm going to make some cheese pizza. And you microwave that piece of pizza. When you take it out of the microwave, there's like the nice gooey parts, and then there's like the spots that's still frozen. That same concept can happen within the bottle. And so when you microwave a bottle, there could be a really hot spot in there, and then there could be still some frozen. And if your baby drinks it and it didn't get mixed well, or if it got too hot, you can actually burn your baby. So that's why we don't want to microwave it, and you have to do kind of that submersion thing where you have the warm water and you put the bottle in and you wait for it to warm up, so that we avoid it getting too hot and causing burns in their mouth.
Okay. Great to know. And are bottle warmers, I think those kinds of products exist. Are those okay to use?
Sure. I mean, you can use the bottle warmer. You also, honestly, you can give your baby cold breast milk or formula. That's okay. Now, some babies are particular, right? So it kind of goes to like how high maintenance your baby may feel. If your baby takes a bottle cold, fantastic. You're not going to hurt them. If your baby is very particular and only wants it warm, well, then it's on you to like realize those feeding cues and have that bottle ready before they start screaming that they're hungry. And so I feel like it's kind of on us as parents. It's the same thing, the wipes warmer for your nursery. Right? Yeah. Like, some people feel like they swear by it and you have to have it. And my baby, the diaper change overnight goes better if I have it. If that's what you need, fine. Did my children have one? Like, nope, they just got cold wipes and they dealt with it. But so it's okay. I think there's also, we got to bring up the fact that there's a lot of like parent shaming, and we talk about mom shaming, and there's certain things where, like, as a doctor, I'm going to talk about, and we go back to like, we talk about the car seats, we talk about safe sleep because it's so important, and I don't want your child to get injured or for your, something bad to happen to your baby. Is anything going to happen with the wipe warmer? No. Or the bottle? No. So I'm going to give you a pass on that one. Like, it's really a no judgment zone, and to trust yourself as a parent and know like that you know what to do. Like, this baby best. And so really being able to take care of them.
I love that. We started out warming the bottles, and then we didn't want to have to warm the sippy cup. And so we kind of gradually went from warm to, we kind of just got it to cold. But, it's like what you start them off with. You have to keep doing it. So,
right. Sometimes they really are particular, right? You've got something and then you're like, oh, you're stuck with this. And when there is a favorite song, when there is a favorite something, like, and you're in that phase, like, you hope that you like it because you're stuck in that phase with them. But then there is that concept of this too shall pass. Some babies.
I was going to say, I worry that, she will only want warm milk, or, you worry that she'll always want the pacifier. But they won't. And
they won't.
You get to wean off of it.
And then you blink and they grow up. Like my oldest just had his 11th birthday, and I'm walking around. I'm like, how do I have a preteen in my house? Like, what is it? Like, you were just a baby. And so it goes so much faster than what you realize. That being said, in the moment, it was exhausting. And it felt like it would never end. And so I have had those sleepless nights, and I feel for parents. And then I'm on the other side now where I'm like, oh, you're a big kid. Like, we get to do cool big kid things. So.
Yeah. And that first year just brings so many worries, like I mentioned before. Right. So I think this has been super helpful for parents. I think we probably have time for maybe one more before we wrap up. I've lost all my lighting here. So, it's fall now in Atlanta. So it's getting darker earlier. So let's just stay on the topic of formula. So lots to do with how to choose formula. Can you switch between formula and breastfeeding, and what to do if there's a formula shortage? So I know we don't have that much time, but just a quick overview of formula and breastfeeding.
Yes. So yes, if you, for whatever reason, are breastfeeding and want to introduce formula, that is fine to do. However, your baby is going to get fed. When it comes to picking a brand, honestly, they're pretty comparable. The labels make it confusing. So when you go and you're reading, you're like, oh, well, this one says it does this, and this one's for tummies, and it must be better. Like, no, they're regulated. And so that's one of the things that has been frustrating with the formula shortage, is that there's strict regulations to test and ensure that formula is safe to be able to give it to your baby. So I do not have a favorite brand. And some babies get particular about a favorite brand, but some babies also will tolerate switching just fine, and that's okay. So if you can't find the formula your baby's on, you're not going to hurt them by giving them a different one. The caveat being for, families with special needs children who are on a prescription formula, that's when you need to call your doctor if you're having a hard time getting that one. But for everybody else, it's okay to switch brands and to go with what's available. What I don't want families to do, and one of the things that I can't emphasize enough, is to please not fall down like that social media rabbit hole for making your own formula. Like, that is just, it is not safe and it's not recommended, because formula is made in a lab in a sterile environment, and there's so many regulations and checkpoints to make sure that you are getting a quality product. And when we try to replicate that at home, it just doesn't equal out. And so I really want to make sure that babies don't get sick from families trying to be able to feed them. So if you have a child under 6 months and you're having a hard time finding formula, call your pediatrician. We will help you because we really want to make sure that if that is how your baby's being fed, that they're getting their optimal nutrition.
I'm so glad you mentioned that and the social media rabbit hole, because during the formula shortage, there was all sorts of things circulating. So really important note to end on there. I can't believe we're almost at time here. Thank you so much, Dr. Nelson. I just wanted to mention, like I said before, that if parents are looking for safety education information in general, we offer so many courses at Baby Center. It's a great way to make sure you're prepared during pregnancy, in the newborn stage, and everything's easily online. We're going to post a link to our courses here in the Q&A so that everyone can take a look and sign up if they're interested. I just wanted to thank to Dr. Nelson. Thank you so much. I hope we can do this again, because I feel like there's just so much to talk about, and we can get into toddler safety and toddler sleep and so many things that I personally have questions on. So I'm hoping we can do this again.
I would love to. It's magical. Being a parent and watching your child grow is a wonderful thing. And as a pediatrician, helping kind of ease the anxiety that comes along with being a parent is what I'm here for. So thank you to everyone who sent in their questions. If you have more, send them along, and I'd love to do it again.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Nelson. And again, just like Dr. Nelson said, thank you, everyone, Baby Center community. You guys are so good. I see so many people have joined tonight. So thank you. We'll do this again very soon, Dr. Nelson. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. All right.
Bye.
Have a good night, everyone.